Hi everyone, thanks for watching. I'm Lauren, and in this video I'm going to be sharing with you my hints and tips for making the Anna Allen Philippa Pants. Now, some of you will be watching this video as you got it as part of a kit with everything you needed to make a really lovely version, or it might be that you got the video as a separate thing. Either way, just remember the video doesn't replace the instructions. It's my extra top tips and advice for helping you to get a really great finish on your project. So do use the video alongside the instructions that come with the pattern. They're really good, they're very in depth, there's lots of illustrations and it breaks things down really nicely. If you did get the kit from us, then inside there you will find a pack of mixed machine needles, and I would suggest using either the size 80 or size 90 for this project with the fabric that we have included. You've also got your matching thread, and then you've got two different sizes of buttons. So you've got one larger one, which is for the waistband, and then you've got the smaller ones, which is for the button fly. Then you've got your interfacing. We have included cotton iron-on woven interfacing for this one. That's my personal preference, the type of interfacing to work with for this project. You've got a little me-made woven label that you can choose to sew into your project, and then you've got your A0 pattern printout. So that's got all of the sizes that are included in this pattern. And if you're looking for the PDF file and the instruction booklet itself, remember that comes as a PDF linked to your order confirmation email, so you can check that out in the email there, or if you log into the website then you can find it in your videos and files section of the account part when you're logged in online too. Then onto the fabric that we have included. So the pattern is designed to be used for non-stretch fabrics. You'll see in the instructions that it does say that you can use stretch fabrics if you want, but that's obviously going to affect the fit a little bit because it is designed specifically for non-stretch fabrics. And we have managed to find a really lovely quality of quite thick and sturdy non-stretch cotton twill fabric that feels really lovely. It's got quite a subtle nap to it, so it feels really soft. It's almost like a little bit like a moleskin almost. And yeah, it feels really nice to wear. It suits this style of pants really well and looks really smart. So we had 3 different colours, nice classic colours that will easily pair with other handmade items that are in your me-made wardrobe. So if you've got nice tops and blouses that have got patterns on them but maybe you're not sure what to wear them with, this acts like a really lovely base for building a me-made outfit where it's not jeans. I wear jeans a lot and it's nice to have an alternative in a trouser that's a little bit smarter than a pair of jeans, so I hope that you get lots of wear out of this make. In terms of pre-washing the fabric, I would recommend that you do pre-wash it. I pre-washed mine at 30 degrees on a normal cycle, and then I left it to air dry, and then just give it a really good press before you come to cut out. Make sure there's lots of water in your iron so that it's generating steam, and then iron it on the single layer. So be ironing it totally flat before you then come to cut it out. I would also recommend ironing it just before you're about to cut it out as well. So if you wash it and iron it and fold it away and then come to cut it out later, just give it another quick press in case it's got any fold lines in it from when you'd stored it. Okay, now on to choosing a size, and I wanted to just talk about my experience with fitting this pattern and looking for other resources that can help you with it as well. So it does come with a pants fitting alteration guide. So that is a PDF document, which again is going to be in your order confirmation email and in the files section when you log into the website. And it specifically talks about this pattern and goes into more depth about choosing a size and making any alterations to that. This particular pattern does come with lots of finished garment measurements. So you'll see in the chart that it's got, it's got the normal body measurements, and then it's got the finished garment measurements, but it's got finished garment measurements for thigh and calf and other areas around the pants as well. So I would really suggest having a good read of the pants fitting guide, because it will help you to understand how much ease and fit is designed to be in this pattern. They are tight fitting around the waist and the hips, and then they sort of they go quite straight, they skim down. They're not skinny because the fabric's not got stretch in it, but they are fairly slim fitting, so it's about making sure you've got the right amount of ease there and then altering your pattern accordingly. So, it talks about altering the crotch length and doing adjustments like full tummy adjustment and that sort of thing. I would suggest that if you're still quite new to fitting trousers, or maybe it's the first Anna Allen pattern that you've tried, is that you do make a toile beforehand, and you can do that just in calico fabric. It doesn't need to be like a full pair of trousers. You don't need to put the pockets on. You don't even need to do a full fly, and it talks about making a muslin or a toile in the pants fitting guide and just sort of basting a zip on where the front fly ends up being, so you're not having to go through the whole process of doing a button fly to check the fit. It could be that you maybe don't even do full length ones as well. You could just do sort of shorts length ones. I would say go just to where the notch is on the inside leg seam. I would make it that length anyway if you don't want to do a full length trouser. So, and that will give you enough of an idea to get the fit around the waist and the hip. Now, the only thing that the pants fitting guide doesn't sort of go into more depth of is interpreting, like when you try something on, and then it might be that you sort of see lines at the front or the back, or then working out what adjustments you need to do. So what I would suggest that you do if you're not sure what adjustments to make and you've made a toile, is that you have a look at the Closet Core Pants Fitting Guide. This is also a free resource that you can get. I'll pop a link to it in the description to this video. It might be that you have to sign up to the Closet Core newsletter, I can't remember, but anyway, you can access it on there, and it's got quite good illustrations of, if you try your trousers on and it's got drag lines that go in this direction, then what you need to do. So you can use that to help you work out what adjustments you need to make as well. But I think that the Anna Allen Pants Fitting Guide then goes into a little bit more depth of then how to actually do those adjustments, so the two together will complement each other really nicely. If you're interested, just to give you some context of what I did to the trousers. So I always do a flat seat adjustment. I don't really have much shape around my hips and my bottom, so I always take a little sort of wedge out of the back rise and do a flat seat adjustment. I also graded between a size 4 at the waist and a size 0 at the hips. Again, I don't really have much shaping in my hips, so I'm like a little bit more sort of straight up and down there. So yeah, I graded from a size 4 at the waist to a 0 at the hips. And then because I had then just followed the 0 size all the way down into the leg, I then just needed to add on a little more to my calves. So clearly for this particular pattern, my calves are not quite in proportion to my hips. So I then just had to add on a little bit of extra ease. I think I added 1 centimetre on at the calves there. I did also then adjust the rise length in total on the front and the back by 2 centimetres. So I took off 1 centimetre at the inside leg seam on the front and the back, and then also within the height of the rise as well. So it just made the whole waistband a little bit lower. So everybody's going to be different in terms of what adaptations they need to make, and it's not, if you do have to make adaptations to it, it's not that there's anything wrong with you, it's a problem. It's just that it's quite normal to have to do that, especially on something that's quite tight fitting. So yeah, I would say it's quite a nice, simple, easy trouser pattern in terms of construction and putting it together, because it doesn't have a back yoke or anything, and it's not got the front pockets. So it's quite a good one to maybe sort of get into depth a little bit more in fitting it, because you've not got those more those more time consuming aspects of construction that you have in jeans with the back yoke and then the front pockets as well. Okay, so on to cutting out and getting all of your things ready to sew. So when you do come to cut it out, I want you to have a little feel of the fabric and make sure that you can work out what's the right and wrong side, and then also where the nap is in the fabric. So the right side, or the outward facing side of the fabric, is the side that's got that sort of diagonal twill weave in it. So you'll kind of see those diagonal lines running on the fabric. The reverse of the fabric looks a little bit sort of flatter, and you don't see any any diagonal lines in that. If anything, it's more like horizontal, sort of, you can see the threads running horizontally on the fabric. So make sure you know what the right side is first of all. And then when you come to actually place your trouser leg pieces on, you want to make sure that the nap of the fabric is in the orientation, so that if you imagine you were wearing them and you were sort of stroking down the way on the pants, is that it would feel nice and smooth. So as you brush the fabric, it will feel slightly smoother in one direction compared to the other direction. So you want to make sure that you put your leg pieces on so that as you smooth down the leg, it feels smoother. Okay, so just have a little feel of that. If your hands are quite dry, or you're struggling to sort of detect where the nap is, maybe ask someone else to have a little feel. You just want to be like not pressing it too hard, just sort of rubbing it gently, like side to side, parallel with the selvage, and you'll be able to detect that one side just feels a bit smoother and glidier and the other side's just got a little bit more resistance in it. My other pointers in terms of cutting out would be to just watch out for the hem shaping at the bottom of the leg. It does have quite a deep hem, and so as you cut it out, you sort of, the shape of the leg kind of tapers in and then it goes out a little bit. So just make sure you're getting that shaping correct so that your hem will sit correctly later when you come to hem it. And then the other thing that you might also want to consider, which I guess you'd maybe detect in the toile making stage if you're doing that, I would cut the waistband a little bit longer than the size that you have cut out for the waist. I found, I've made a lot of trousers before, and quite often I find that the waistband is always longer than you need it, because it's really easy to cut it down, but it just gives you more flexibility. But I found that the waistband like fitted just exactly, like it didn't really leave much wriggle room really. So I think just to cover yourself, it's probably worthwhile just adding on a couple of extra inches to the waistband just in case, because it's so easy to cut it down later anyway when you come to attach the waistband on. Also on the topic of the waistband, if you did want to put a curved waistband in, it does have instructions of how to do that in the pants fitting guide as well. So if you prefer curved waistbands, then you can definitely do that with this one. It explains how to do it. So the next thing is making sure that you put all of your notches and your pattern markings on. You will see quite a lot of pattern markings on this pattern, and I think you just sort of need to maybe think ahead a little bit about what they are and the best way to mark them. So on the back pockets, for example, it's got lots of little dots, but they merge quite closely into each other. It may be quite hard to find your exact dot. What you could do is just cut a notch at the side. You don't need to find what dot you should be on for the size you're making. Just cut a little notch at the side. You'll be able to work out the turning for the top of the pocket and everything based off of that. You'll also see little crosses which go along near the top edge of the leg pieces, front and back. They're for the belt loops. So you could mark them with a tailor's tack if you wanted. You could just do a little notch in the top edge of just where the cross is, so that you know where the belt loop goes later. So that's what they're for. But then the ones that I would say are it's worth taking a little bit more time to like get them precise and mark them accurately as well, is the point of the dart on the back leg, the positioning for the back pocket, and then you've got some circle markings around the fly pieces as well. So my personal preference when you want to be really accurate is to do a tailor's tack. I use a double length of thread. I just thread it through the point that I want to mark, and then when you come to peel the pattern pieces off, just peel it off carefully so you don't pull the thread off. Separate out your fabrics, and then you can cut it and you're left with a bit of thread in either side. I find that the most accurate way without like really heavily marking the fabric with chalk, which is maybe hard to get off later. If you do like using chalk, or maybe you've got the disappearing pens or whatever, that's totally fine, whatever works for you. My tip is really just to be as accurate as possible, because when you've got quite a lot of pieces that come together at one point at the fly, you have to make sure that they're marked accurately so that everything lines up and you sort of know exactly where you're sewing. Okay, general tips before we go on to actually starting the sewing. All of the measurements are in inches in this pattern, so it can take a little bit of getting used to if you're used to working in centimetres. If you're really struggling with the inches and you just kind of keep getting mixed up with it, you could just go through the instructions and work out what the conversions are, and then just make a little note of that as you go through if your preference difference is centimetres, but I think once you've kind of tuned your eye into that and you know where you're lining up in the foot of the machine, you just sort of get into the rhythm of it a little bit. The seam allowances in general are 1/2 centimetre, but just pay attention around the fly area because there are 3/8 seam allowances there. So you want to just make sure that you maybe highlight it or something so you're picking up the difference in that, because you have, again, around the fly you have to make sure that you're sticking to the correct seam allowances and lining everything up so that it all comes together correctly. For the top stitching, you can choose what stitch length you want to use. So it might be that you want to lengthen it for the top stitching, so you could lengthen it to 3 or 3.5. I actually personally prefer using just a regular stitch length, which is 2.5. I think everybody's just got different aesthetic preferences. It's not, the length that you choose is not functionally going to change anything, it will just change how it looks. So on one sample you can see that I did a longer stitch length, and then on another sample you can see that I did a shorter stitch length. So if you're not sure what one you want to go for, just do a little test on some scraps, see what you prefer, see what your machine does in terms of top stitching and how things look, and just pick a preference from there. The only thing I would say is that if you are doing a longer stitch length, you just have to remember to switch between those stitch lengths, because when you sew regular seams, I would recommend that you do them at the 2.5mm length, because it will make the seams a little bit stronger. So it's just for the top stitching that you would want to lengthen it. Also, this fabric is quite thick. It might be at certain places that you feel like your machine's starting to struggle a little bit, or you've got lots of layers to go through. The needles that you've got should be fine, they will be able to handle it. I just found in certain parts of the construction, I had to use the little black button on the side of my sewing machine, or you can use a hump jumper as well, which is basically just like a little stack of fabric that you can fold up to help level the foot off if you're going from only sewing a couple of layers to sewing more layers. But I'll mention that during the construction as well, just on places that you might want to spot it, that you might notice it a little bit more, and just highlight that for you. Okay, before you actually start sewing, you need to get all your interfacing pieces ready. So just make sure that you are putting them on the right way round, because obviously the fly is not symmetrical, so you need to make sure you've got the right pieces of the fly interfaced. When I cut my pieces out, it was just quicker and easier to just cut 2 of them because the fabric was folded anyway, but obviously for the fly pieces you only need 1 of them, it says that on the pattern piece. So then just I would pay close attention to what the interfacing is telling you to do. So it tells you to either cut it glue side up or glue side down, and then that will give you a clue as to what bit of fabric you then need to attach it onto. When you come to put the interfacing onto the waistband, you have to sort of place it just up from where the seam allowance is. So a way to help line that up a little bit easier is if you press your waistband in half, so you've got that centre line crease, and then you put your interfacing on, lining it up with that crease, so then you'll basically have your seam allowance at the bottom that's uninterfaced. So that can just help you get, line it up nice and quickly in the right position on the waistband. Then you have to trim off the little bit that sort of sticks out on the fly on the wearer's left front. So as you lay your pieces out in front of you flat with the right side of the fabric closest to you and facing you, it will be the piece that's on your right hand side. But if you think about it, when the trouser legs are then on you, it's the bit that is going to be on the left hand side of your body. So just make sure that you are getting the right piece, that you're trimming it off so that your fly ends up being the right way around. So you're just trimming that little 3/8 of a section off all the way up there. Then before you actually start sewing anything, you need to do some overlocking or finishing off the seam allowances. So you're either going to be doing zigzag stitch on your machine, or if you've got the overlocker, then you can do that. What I did to save time here was I kind of stacked up all of the pieces that needed overlocking at the same time. It just saves lots of up and down. So you've got your belt loop piece that needs an edge of overlocking. You've got your fly pieces as well, so all of them can be overlocked at the same time. You've got your front crotch and your side seams, and then when it comes to doing the right hand side of the front crotch, I would do those 2 pieces, I would do that curve in two sections. So you've got that straighter bit that sort of sticks out, that's nice and easy to overlock, but then you've got that little curved bit at the bottom. So you can either overlock it, being really careful to sort of fold the other bit that sticks out the way as you do that. But if you're finding it hard to overlock and like stop in the middle of something, rather than like overlocking over the edge like you normally would when you overlock something, then if you're really worried about that and you don't want to like accidentally splice into the fabric with the blade of the overlocker, you could disengage the blade, or you could also just sew that tiny little section with a zigzag stitch in the sewing machine. So yeah, just take care of that section because it is a bit of a funny one with the way it's angled. So now it's time to start sewing the fly. So you're going to take your right leg piece, that's the wearer's right leg, and your fly underlap, and they are going to get sewn together. So you'll have your little dot markings that you can line up, but really the fly underlap will extend down a little bit from the wearer's right leg. I would sew it with the right leg facing up you as you sew, so you kind of know where to stop, just where that little bit of fabric sticks out. All the seam allowances then get pressed towards the leg, and then you've got a line of top stitching to do there just to hold that in place. Then you're going to move on to the left leg. So you've got the fly facing, it's going to get sewn on here. And again, you need to have your circle markings in place here when you do that, because you don't sew all the way to the bottom of that facing section. You need to know where to stop there. So it's basically like the seam allowance up from the bottom that you're stopping. So make sure you do a little reverse there. You have to then clip into where that line of stitching ends, and then all of that gets pressed in towards the wrong side of the fabric on that left leg piece. So then you end up with like a little bit of shaping sticking out at the bottom. So you're going to do a line of top stitching there as well to hold that in place, and then it's time to get the button section on. So what I found easiest to do when I was marking my buttonholes is get to this stage where it's all interfaced and it's folded and pressed in half and overlocked, then mark the buttonholes on. So if you fold your pattern piece in half as well, I've got a one-step buttonhole foot on my machine, so I know that I only need to mark where I want the buttonhole to start. Once I put the button in the foot of the machine, the foot then auto calculates the size of button that I need for the button that I'm using. So then you just want to make sure that you're getting the height distance of the buttonholes correct. Just pop a pin in there and then get your buttonholes sewn on. I would also suggest cutting them open at this stage as well. I didn't at the time, and then when I went to try and cut them open later, it was a little bit annoying. So I would suggest cutting them open once you've actually sewn the buttonholes here. So once you've got the buttonholes on, then you can attach it to the leg. Now it talks about basting things in place here. What I did at this point was I pinned it on, and then with the wrong side of the leg facing me, so like the inside part of it, I then changed the colour of thread that was in my bobbin, and I did a line of long basting stitches on the machine. So I think I put it to like a 4.5 or 5 millimeter length, and I just followed the stitch line of where my overlocking stitches were. So I just stitched that curve all the way round, and then it meant when I flipped it back over to the right side, I could see the contrast colour of bobbin thread on the fabric there, and then I could do my line of top stitching just following that line of basting stitches. Then you just unpick it later and you've got a really nice curve that is in the right place there. So now you can sew the two front legs together. You want to line them up so that they're like this, matching up the edge of the curve, the crotch curve at the very bottom, and you'll see that they almost look offset a little bit here, which is what they should be. That is all fine, it's going to come together good. Then you have to sew that little curve, that bottom curved section of the crotch, and it's important that you're quite accurate here, so that you don't get a bubble at the bottom of the curve, so it's right from that point all the way down. Now before you then do any top stitching, I would then press it open and look from the right side and make sure that things are lying flat and that you've not got any little sort of bubbles or things kind of look off a little bit at that bottom crotch curve there. If they do, it's probably just because you've not sewn to like precisely the right point. Make sure you do a little reverse or like a back stitch at that point as well to reinforce that. So once you're happy that things are looking nice and even and flat, then you have to do a little bit of top stitching at that bottom crotch curve there. So I would like, flip it over, get things lined up, pin it in place, and then start at the very bottom of the curve and stitch up towards where the fly is. So you're going to come all the way up, and you're going to be going from like a couple of layers of fabric here to sewing through quite a lot of layers of fabric. So you might need to just help your machine a little bit as you turn it round to go along the top section of the 2 lines of stitching that you're doing. You'll see that the foot of the machine will sort of be on an angle. So I just tipped it and pressed the little black button at the side of my foot to level it out. If you don't have that, you could just fold up a little scrap of fabric and place it underneath to level the foot out. I then came across 3 stitches, pivoted round, and then stitched all the way down again. And then just to reinforce that top section, you have to do a bar tack. So I use my zigzag stitch for this. I put it on a width of 1.5 millimeters and a length of 0.6 centimeters. So that just secures the fly there. And then your fly is in place. I actually really love a button fly. I feel like it comes together surprisingly quickly, and I actually prefer to sew it than I do a button fly for some reason. I don't know why. So if it's the first time you're trying a button fly, well done. I'm sure it looks lovely. Okay, on to your back legs now. So the way that these trousers come together is basically you make the front and then you make the back and then you put the 2 together. So everything in the back leg, I would say, is fairly straightforward. You've got some darts to sew there, and then a nice detail is to put some top stitching on it as well. And then when you come to make the pockets, again, that's fairly straightforward too. You're just pressing it, hemming the top, pressing the edges at the side, and then they get sewn on like patch pockets. I probably would suggest putting the pockets on before you sew the center back crotch seam, and you join the 2 legs together, just because it's less fabric to handle in the machine when you're putting the pockets on. If you didn't make a toile and you're making the pocket, you're putting the pockets on and doing it all for the first time, it might be that you want to base them on at this stage, just in case you want to tweak the position later. If you think that you might alter the side seams or the centre back crotch seam and sort of take it in, you don't want your pockets to be permanently sewn on, just in case any changes that you do there might change the angle of them. So it might be that you just want to base them on so that it's easy to change that later if you need to, but if you don't, they're already basted on, and then it's obviously easy to top stitch them later. I also did a little bar tack at the top of that, so whether you're top stitching them on now or you're basting them and going to finish it off later, what I did was the 2 lines going all the way around, but just at that top section, at the top of the pocket, again, the bar tack, as I did for the fly, just to secure that top edge a little bit. I put my phone in my back pocket a lot, so I think it needs a little bit of extra reinforcements. And then, yeah, you're going to sew the back crotch and do your double lines of stitching there. And then you're ready to join the back and the front of the trousers together. Now, the key thing that I want you to really pay attention to here is that you're matching the notches on the inside leg seam, because you have to ease the fabric between the crotch seam and the notch on the leg of the inside leg seam. You have to pin those 2 landmarks together, and you're going to have to sort of pull and ease the fabric together to make sure those raw edges line up. So just watch out for that one. But yeah, you sew the inside leg seam first, and then you've got some top stitching to do there. I actually only did one line of top stitching there. A personal preference on that one. You could do 2 if you wanted to. And then you have got your outside leg seams to sew as well. Before you sew your outside leg seams, what I found easiest to do later is if you press the hem allowance. So you've sewn your inside leg seam, then press the hem allowance up so that you've got those crease lines there, and then sew the side seams, but open out the bits that you've pressed, so you're just sewing it straight all the way down. I think because it's quite narrow at the bottom of the trouser, it's just easier to press something when it's flat rather than when it's already like a circle and it's sewn together. So yeah, you've got your outside leg seam sewn, then you've got a little bit of top stitching to do at the top. So a little bit like what you would do in jeans, if you've ever made jeans before. You're basically pressing the seam allowances both towards the back and then doing a line of top stitching to where that notch is. If you've lost your notch by this point, you could just measure it down on the pattern and see how far you need to go. It was somewhere sort of in the middle of where the pocket was, I think, on mine. And then doing a little bar tack at the bottom there. You then do just need to clip into that because the seam allowances below that get pressed open. So in order for them to get pressed open and sit a bit flatter there, I would just clip into the seam allowance at the bottom of where that top stitching is. Then remember to position your belt loops before you put your waistband on. So whether you mark them with a little notch before, or you just need to check your pattern piece again on where they're going. You've got 2 at the front, 2 at the back, and then 1 at the centre back as well. So get them basted in place, and then it's time to put your waistband on. So I constructed the waistband in a little bit of a different way from what the pattern says to do at the sort of centre edge. So you want to sew it on. You want to sew the interfaced bit onto your trousers first, because that's going to be the outside of the waistband. And once you've got that sewn on, instead of then like pressing that inside edge of the waistband in, I then folded it back on itself like this, so it was right sides together, and then just sew that little sort of straight up and down section there on both sides. Before you then like clip it and then press it round and everything to then finish the waistband, just check they're symmetrical. So you can sort of push it round the right way and just check that they're even side by side, just in case there's been any slight variation in lining things up or seam allowances, anything like that. Once you're happy they're symmetrical, then you can clip it and press everything the right way round, and then that raw edge on the inside edge of the waistband that's been pressed over, that just sort of encloses all of the raw edges there. Then you're going to be top stitching your waistband down. If you want to put the little woven label that we gave in the kit, you can pop that in at the centre back as well, and just catch that in this line of stitching. Now when you do stitch round the waistband, I would definitely put the needle in the middle position of the foot, because then more fabric will be under the foot as you sew. It's easier to control it. And what you'll find is that when you come to sew the edge of the waistband, that the machine might struggle a little bit, just because there's lots of layers of fabric there. So as you turn the corner, as you're finding that the angle of the foot on the machine sort of goes down and it's like it's got to climb a hill, then you can use the little black button at the side of your foot, or you can use that hump jumper. So just fold a little scrap of fabric up, tuck it underneath the foot at the back, and you'll see that levels the foot out, and it just means the machine finds it easier to grip the fabric and feed it all the way through. So yeah, just take your time as you're going round those thick layers on the waistband. Then you need to just finish off your belt loops. So you have to just sew them down first, and then kind of flip them back on themselves and kind of tuck the top edge under, and then do a little bar tack at the top. Again, I use the zigzag stitch with the 1.5mm width and 0.6 millimeter length. So you do that to secure. Then you've got your hem to do as well. Now, because it's quite a narrow hem at the bottom, what I found easiest to do was, as I said before, if you've already pressed it, it's easier because you can just kind of then tuck it up. And then it's already sort of pressed into position. I had the trouser legs the right way round, and then I actually stitched it from the inside of the leg so that I could see where I was stitching near the top of the fold there. So you have to sort of do it in little sections, kind of sew a bit, reposition the fabric and sew it all the way around. Make sure you start at your inside leg seam here as well, just so that it makes the start and end of your stitching less obvious, because it's on the inside of the trousers. If you find that the stitching on your machine doesn't look as good from the bobbin side and you would rather sew it from the right side of the fabric, what I would do is sew it as I've just shown you, but sew it with a long basting stitch in a contrasting colour of bobbin thread, as I did for the fly, and then turn the trousers so that they're wrong way facing out, and then you can stitch with the right side of the fabric facing up and follow your basting stitches as a guide stitching it round. I know that some machines just look the stitching just looks better from the top thread rather than from the bottom thread, so just check what you like your machine to do, and you can choose what way round to do it from there. The final thing I want to share is just when you sew the buttons on. So the buttons that we included in this kit are quite flat buttons, and because the fabric is quite thick, you don't want your buttons to be sitting too flat against the fabric. You want them to be standing up a little bit. So as you sew the buttons on, don't pull the thread too tight as you're going round the holes of the button. Just keep a little bit of slack in it, and then once you've been through all of the holes, bring the needle up but underneath the button, and then wrap it round and round and round and round lots of times. And what that does is it almost creates a little shank, or like a little mini pedestal for the button to sit on, and it just lifts the button up off the fabric a little bit. So it means that when your button is then through the buttonhole, it's not pulling or puckering the fabric as much. So I would suggest doing that for all the buttons, the waistband ones and the ones on the fly as well. So I hope you have found all of those hints and tips useful, and that you really enjoy making these trousers. I love them. I love wearing them. I think they're so comfy and smart, and I just love the fabric as well. It just feels so nice and soft. If you're getting stuck, do reach out into the private Facebook group that we've got for Sewing Society customers who've bought kits or videos. Just remember to say what kit or video that you've bought when you request to join. The link to join that will be in the description to the video. And if you need any other help, you're really getting stuck, the G&G team and I are always more than happy to help as well. So do just drop us an email if you are stuck. But thanks so much for watching. Happy sewing, and I'll see you next time. Bye.